What's up, guys, and welcome back to another episode of Surviving the Side Hustle. I'm super excited today because we've got Lewis Kim on, and he is a builder, investor, spiritual entrepreneur who's redefining what it means to own and lead in the 21st century. He's the son of a Korean immigrant who gave him the gift of entrepreneurial spirit. And he's built and sold over $50 million worth of businesses across industries. But after years of success, he hit a wall, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. That breakdown sparked a complete reinvention. He stepped away, rebuilt from the inside out, and returned with a new mission, which is to help others reclaim purpose through ownership. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you on, man. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, Rob, for having me on. I'm excited to.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of dive in and hearing about your story, what you're up to now, and a little bit about what you've gone through too. So I'll let you kind of take over and start us off wherever you may want to for your journey.
I appreciate it. I appreciate the carte blanche. So as you had kind of said in the intro, I was fortunate enough to grow up in a family that was entrepreneurial. My parents being immigrants and, came here nothing. Classic story from the 70s of Korean immigrants coming with nothing other than hard work, sort of desire and a little bit of luck. And so that early on, I kind of knew I wouldn't be getting a professional sort of job. And so I bought my first business in my early 20s, sold it in a couple of years, did really well, and it sort of set me on this path of entrepreneurship for myself. And along the way, things came in hindsight now, things came pretty early. And success was, everything, the trappings of success, everything that everyone thinks that they want. I had a woman that loved me, a great life in terms of experiences, going out, really good relationships and having a little bit of status, I guess, within the industries I was operating in. But then I got to a point, I was really unhappy. And when I got there, sold the businesses with money in the bank, you think everything's fine. And then you start to realize that this unhappiness is something deeper. And so a little bit over the last decade has all been about rebuilding myself. And I can say now that I was definitely suffering from burnout. And it got into a point where I was miserable because I had no sense of purpose. I had no direction. And really what I didn't have was clarity. And I think clarity is perhaps one of the greatest gifts that a person can have, because once you have that sense of purpose and direction, it's so easy to filter the noise. And especially the world we live in now, right? Where there's just so much noise everywhere, right? Everything's fighting for your attention. And in a world like that, we just have to be more and more clear. And fortunately, I've gone through a process that's allowed me to do it and completely rebuild where I'm going and what I'm doing.
Yeah, I mean, you're so true with that about today, with the immediate attention grabs left and right. Everyone's fighting for your attention, and it's easy to kind of get lost in the sauce, I guess. And then I too, I don't know how much of my story you know, but I too suffered through a pretty serious sprint season where I had burnt out pretty hard. My health fell apart, relationships, everything, ended up losing my father. And it took a while for me to kind of shift gears and decide that I needed to change something in my life. And eventually that led to where I'm at now. But I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about you and how that shift and change kind of was, because I know how much it kind of sucks when you're just kind of working, building, growing, creating things, but
Yeah.
not really feeling any purpose or fulfillment behind it. So I want to hear your take on how that whole shift and journey began for you.
Well, I'm a little hard-headed. So it didn't come easy. I can tell you that. It was, you think, and when you're in your 20s, right, you think you know everything and you've got all the energy in the world to do it. And you do things and you succeed sometimes in spite of yourself. But then when you get to a certain point and you look back at all the effort putting into play, when you start to make the connections that maybe not all of it was because I'm such a genius, right? There was some fortune and some other people really helped me actually get to where I was. And I had started to I'd started to feel this sense of, because it was the idea of I'll be happy when, right? I'll be happy if. And then you keep hitting those milestones and you look back and you go, I'm still not happy. What's going on? Oh, maybe it's this thing now. And I'll go pursue that. And when you're, in that age, the late 20s, early 30s, you got so much drive. You just keep going. You just keep going, right? And you don't think about the cost and the toll, right? I mean, you know, as an entrepreneur over time, there is a cost, right? There's a physical, emotional, relationship, spiritual cost to being an entrepreneur. And if you don't keep those things in balance, it'll catch up to you. And that's what it did to me. And I got to a point where I was so depressed, I couldn't get out of bed. And I spent a good deal of time like just getting up and sitting in a bathtub watching Netflix. And this is literally with like money in the bank that I could be going to do cool stuff. But you hit something and then now you've succeeded and you start to look at it and go, well, what does it all mean? What am I going to do with my life? And for me, I had to hit a fairly low point because my lifestyle had gotten to a place where I was in the need to search for that thing. I was finding myself no longer in the circles that I had been in and finding myself going deeper and deeper into places. And, there was a period of drinking too much. All of the things, all the vices you could think of, I probably indulged at some point because this is how I process things. I told you I'm hard headed. Like I need to experience them. And so I needed to experience a little bit of pain. And eventually you get to a point where you just say, this is ridiculous. My life is so much more. There's got to be so much more. And I hit a threshold one point. I just said, this is not what I want. I'm tired of feeling this way. And it really started it. And going down the path of the spiritual part of it is what really helped make me get clear. And it helped me understand the bigger picture for myself, which has now completely changed how I do things. When I said earlier, like when you're clear in your direction, it's like that lighthouse in like a dark sea. When you see it, it doesn't matter what anything else going on around you, right? You're just like, that's where I'm going. And so that threshold really did it. And it changed everything. It's changed how I look at even just what I do in life. I'm no longer trying to have this unrealistic idea of work-life balance. It's about converging my life with my mission, and letting my family, the people that love me, know this is important to me and this is where I'm going. And I want your support to get there. And so getting clear is perhaps one of the greatest things a person can do for themselves.
Yeah, and I knew for me, my situation, I had just continued to like bury myself in my work
Yeah.
until because that became like a distraction from what was going on in my real life. And luckily enough, I was able to kind of continue and function with everything that I was going on at a relatively high level where I was still successful or appeared successful on paper until I was kind of denied that schedule. So like it was like a holiday
Mhm.
weekend, everybody was away and I was like sit back and I had this moment to reflect and I was like, what is going on? Like, this is not how I used to spend my Friday nights. Like I'm sitting here like frantically trying to like fill my work schedule and then I reflected on that and that was when I made the decision something needed to change. But I had gone in another about 3 years trying to get clear on what it is that I wanted to do. I knew it was something different, but I was
Yeah.
kind of in and out of a bunch of different projects and kind of 50-50
Great.
here and there. So I want to know what it was like. How did you gain that clarity? What was it like and where are you moving now? Because I know your mission is
Yeah.
to help others reclaim purpose.
Yeah.
So fill
So
me in a little bit.
I laughed when you said that because I was in the same boat, right? I think this is what you know, right? And if building things is what you know, and it gave you some sense of identity and purpose at that point, you go back to it, right? And then you say, oh, I'm going to do this, but your soul, your spirit already knows when you start it that it's not for you, right? It's like banging your head and you're like, why isn't it working this time? And then you try something different. And then I had gotten to a place as I was coming out of this where I was like, well, I'm going to stick to what I know and what I do well. And then I got into a bunch of different partnerships, right? And that was its own just chaos, right? It was me not understanding that really what I was trying to do was not face those things internally that I was shying away from. I had fear behind. And so the idea of getting a partner is like, well, my partner's better at doing that. That's what I didn't do well last time. Let me just put that person there and it solves everything. It's like, no, that actually makes it more complicated. If you don't have perfect alignment with a partner, it's never going to work out. Uh, but getting clear really, it it came from a lot of personal work. I mean, I think you will say the same, is that entrepreneurship, I think it is one of the greatest ways of improving who you are as a person, right? because you constantly have to increase your skills and you've got to get better and better with interacting with people, right? Whether it's employees, customers, vendors. And the idea, sometimes being the one that appears to be the softest, but can continue to keep customers and vendors and people in place that help you create your vision is actually the strongest place to be. You don't have to be the big gorilla that's hitting everybody over the head, right? Sometimes the approach of accepting what's going on and accepting people for who they are and understanding that there's a purpose for them helping. And so for me, I had to go through very deep personal growth in order to find that purpose and clarity because my head was so busy. And I think all entrepreneurs are. I'm sure both of us while sitting here have thought of business ideas, right? So I had to go inward. I had to go back and really work through things in my past, right? Work on forgiveness and these things. And it opened the door and this world to me of this creative source and energy that comes with such beauty and care from reconciling all those feelings, right? All those things, because we all have them. We all have these chips. And the more you can chip away at them, I think the greater an entrepreneur you can be because you will find like your true inner voice when all of that noise is stripped away from it. And so I did that through somatic breath work, plant medicines. It's why I'm such a huge advocate for plant medicines. I'm on the board of a church that serves plant medicines, and it opened the door. It really opened the door to let go a lot of those things from the past. And that releasing of all of that starts to really make it easy to open up and sort of find your center.
Awesome. I mean, that must have been pretty cool getting into the plant medicines and doing that internal work and just kind of going through the whole journey itself. And I'm kind of interested to hear, is that how you're helping individuals now kind of discover or reclaim their purpose? Or is there what does it look like working with you? I guess I would say.
Yeah. So my day job and what I've done is I've evolved from being a solo entrepreneur into being a small business owner to now running a private equity firm. And we do the exact same things that we did before, but as a team at a bigger scale with investor money instead of just my own. Along that way, I started to realize as my organization is pursuing larger deals, there's all of these small businesses that are available. It's something in the neighborhood of like $64 trillion of wealth is going to pass from the baby boomers to the younger generations. And there's 2.5 million small businesses that are owned by baby boomers. And amongst those, something in like 60 to 70% of them, they don't have a plan for succession, meaning they don't have any idea what they're going to do when they retire or it's time to hang up the spur. It creates this enormous opportunity. And so for me, as I've gotten clear about what I want to do, there's only so much I can do as an individual. And so what I've taken on is I would love to be in a place where I can share the things of leadership that I've learned with other people, but I don't want to be in a place of, I'm not going to become Tony Robbins or personal development coach. Like that's just not my path. And I just started to understand, look, if I could help other entrepreneurs, people who are entrepreneurial, especially those who are roughly my age, like mid-career, you've probably done pretty well. And, you're looking for that other thing now in life to help them buy their first business, but really influence them in how they operate as business owners. Because if they're first time owners, gives me a chance to really impart the values that I've brought along and learned through the years and help them find that sense of purpose. Right. And so what we teach, and that's where we launched the owner's path, which is it's an apprenticeship to buy your first business. And in that, the biggest thing we talk about is fit, right? Is finding the right fit, the financial fit, the type of operation, all those things, because it comes down to, if we can get the person who's got sort of their native place, the things they're good at, the things that they're already oriented and wired towards, and we find them a good business that is already existing, what that person can do with that base over the next 20, 30 years of their life is build something phenomenal, right? Because if you already love it, right? If you're already inclined towards, or your personality is very suited for the dynamics of the business, it's not going to feel like work, right? You're going to go in every day really driven to build this thing because it's so native to you. And that's become one of the big things that I'm working on, because I just want to share. I want to help people get to that point of getting clear. The church part of it is a whole different thing for anyone, right? And that's for anyone if you're not an entrepreneur, anyone who is seeking more, who is looking for fulfillment, I mentioned his name, but Tony Robbins says that the ultimate success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure. And for me, myself, I definitely experienced that with my own burnout. And so I don't want to be largely successful without being completely fulfilled. And so my hope is to teach others how to do that.
Yeah, and I think you're like you said, you're in an opportune time because so many baby boomer businesses are kind of like coming to market. I have a buddy of mine who started with a tree removal business, and he was removing a tree from someone's yard who happened to own this decently successful fencing business, and he just made an offer right on the spot, bought the fencing business for like $15,000,
Yeah.
took the 6 employees, hired 4 new ones, and then immediately 8 weeks later, the fencing business was doing 20 grand a week.
Yeah.
And then just scaled up and then scaled up, and now he's got like 8 different arms of his business, and he's
Yeah.
doing like 24 million a year. And
That's wild.
so yeah, there's a lot of opportunity out there, and a lot of people who are interested in that would be great.
You can't even put it like, how do you even calculate the ROI on that? Right. Like there's no way. Right. And your friend is such a perfect example of taking a risk on yourself. Right. You go into something that has existing customer base and cash flow. You understand how the business dynamics work. It's limitless where you can go with it. Right. And I'm sure your friend along the way, though, had to grow, right? Had to grow substantially because operating the tree removal business and this small fencing company to operating an 8-figure operation. I mean, they're not even in the same league, right? They're not even the same sport, really. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really important too. Later on, I have a friend of mine that I want to connect you with because a lot of people are interested in getting into the entrepreneurial world and looking for businesses. And a lot of listeners too, I know, are very interested in where to go and where to get involved with all of that. If we've got people listening and they want to
Yeah.
chime in towards the end of the episode,
Sure.
would they be able to reach out to you and connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's just the ownerspath.com. It's got the contact form. It comes directly to myself and my assistant. So even if someone hears something and they just have a question, I got no problems. I'm genuinely doing that because I want to help others because I feel like I've learned so much from my family, from my folks in particular about business and a lot of the knowledge. I mean, before we did this call, my assistant and I, when it comes to deal flow, I'm always on the front end of things and we're looking through it. And I got all excited because I figured out like why this guy's selling. And it was just from years of understanding that within the numbers, there's a story, right? And very quickly I looked at something and my intuition was just like, oh yeah, he's choking to death on the rent on all these locations that he's opened in his business. And then we started to do the math and in the industry that he's in, their rent should somewhere between 10 and 20%, but his gross revenue, he was at like 65% expense for his rent, against his revenue. So of course he's trying to get out there and sell it.
Yeah. But yeah, so I'd love to kind of bring this back into hearing a little bit more on your story and when you made that shift into now really into your own mission and kind of making that change. And you were in that dark place before and you started going down and making changes because you've obviously had a lot of success with a lot of the things that you've been doing in your life to get up to that point there. But what were some of the things that needed to change for you to move into the next stage of your life?
Yeah, our thoughts, right? Our thoughts they are the number one thing that are going to drive where we go. But our thoughts are also driven by our focus. And our focus though is also, it's like this, we've got this interconnected system that exists. And the first thing I had to learn to shift was I used to think focusing on, because as an entrepreneur, like you're super optimistic, right? But you're also constantly preparing for the world falling apart, right? Because you want to be ready to pivot and go. And sometimes that can take you in a place where you focus too much on that, right? And I'd gotten to a place where that's all I saw. What was that, and it was the less positive side of things. And really, I really had to learn how to have sovereignty over my emotions. And that was the biggest thing. And I can now say, had I had a more centered place with my own personal emotions, the burnout would have never happened. because I would have started to get to a place where my threshold starts to feel that way. And I would have been able to be mature and sort of centered and adult enough to say, okay, I'm going to take some time off. I'm going to let all this decompress and then let myself get back to how I feel. But in that moment when I was get in the place of burnout, you're like, everything's awful, everything's awful. And then I kept telling myself, look, it's the business. I'm unhappy because the business. I got to sell, I got to sell, I got to sell. And that's where we went. And so it took me a couple years afterwards to really learn how to get centered and change my focus on what I'm focusing on, so that I started to feel more optimistic and positive towards things again. And so that was the number one thing is being in charge and sort of feeling things, but really embracing all of that and then shifting the focus towards things that were going to serve me, as opposed to bring me down.
Yeah, I love where you were bringing that because for me and my coaching and everything that I kind of basically lived through, the through line really starts with awareness and
Yeah.
how like
Such a great word. That's
but
such a great word.
it's so
Yeah.
difficult to
Yeah.
teach awareness to people or individuals who aren't even ready to learn about it because we get like we talked earlier, like it's so easy to just lose our attention and just get lost in everything.
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of build up that skill to pay attention to things.
Yeah.
So for like yourself, how do you keep yourself in the right mindset currently so that you don't fall back into maybe some of those distractions or other things going on?
There's three big things. The first thing, just anecdotally, I know I'm on the right path here. I'd spoken to someone recently who's 84. Guy's got 400 employees, 4 companies, like 10 divisions. And he said to me, because I'd asked him how he keeps up this energy and this positivity and this, 84 guys out there doing bodybuilding still and wants to meet new people. He wants to talk to young people all the time because he wants to just like see what's happening. And he just said, I have built my life around constantly keeping very positive people in my life, right? And so people that give me energy. And so people that are excited, people that are doing interesting things. And he says, I don't care what they do, but as if they're passionate and they love what they do and they're interesting and they're positive, is like, I want to get to know them. And so for me, that's something that I've definitely learned is having that circle of friends and people around you that are positive, right? Because not everyone's going to get it. Entrepreneurship can feel very lonely, right? And to be surrounded by those types of people, I think are super important. The other thing I do is I do things such as breathing, cold plunging, and meditation, which I think are all driven towards getting myself into the calm, centered state. Cold plunging isn't directly like that because when you get in, you're like, oh
Yeah.
my God. But I don't know if you cold plunge, but over the course of the day, you start really hype, and then you start to come back to the center and you're just super clear, right? There's that. And then the third thing is really trying to be present with the people that I love. And if I can appreciate those moments with the people that I care about and close friends, my wife, my parents, my siblings, just when I'm there, I want to feel and be there for every moment, so that those little things, that little bit of joy and happiness that comes up in those interactions with the people you care about, so that when I am struggling or I am going through a difficult period of time with work or anything else, those are little things that they're like, it's like candy you carry around in your pocket, right? It's like you don't feel so good. And it's like, well, let me take a second and remember what it felt like when I, was at Thanksgiving with my mom, or, like doing this with my wife or whatever it is. And that has really helped me also stay there because, the brain doesn't know, right? The brain lives in a made up world, right? Everything in the brain is fed to it with sensations and nerves. And so if you can relive those moments, the brain thinks it's happening right now. And so it will release all the same chemicals. And that's the kind of thing that I've done to really help keep myself in that positive place.
Yeah, you just shared a whole lot of things that I'd love to kind of touch on. The whole concept of the brain not understanding what's real and what's not real. I don't remember the exact study, but for those who haven't heard of it, go look it up. But it was involved basketball shooters, and
Yeah.
they had one group shooting shots every day after school. They had one group visualizing that they'd shoot shots
Yeah.
after school, and they had one group totally not do anything. And then the group that like shot or visualized shooting ended up testing or retesting just as well as the team that actually did go out and shoot. So that's like crazy, right? Isn't that
Yeah.
insane how like your brain can trick you into that? But also you had mentioned a little bit about gratitude and mindfulness, and I'm a huge fan of those because that really keeps me grounded and allows me to like stay present as much as possible. That little, whether it's just a short little meditation just to kind of pause my brain for a few minutes, and then all the way to like journaling practices helps me keep my
Yeah.
memory fresh and keep up to date on different things that have been happening, and really allows me to kind of create like a scorecard of all the great successful things that have been going on. And then the last thing I want to ask you here, just piggybacking off of what you were
Yeah.
sharing before, is the circles of positive people around you. You
Yeah.
had mentioned when you were going through the dark times and you kind of stepped away from the business and you were still trying to decide and figure things out. You said that you were finding yourself in different circles or not in the same circles that you previously were.
Yeah.
And to get into the newer circles now that you're surrounding yourself with, what was that journey like and how did you start that process? Because I know myself when I first started out, it was like, all right, well, how do I get around other people? I don't know where to look or anything.
Yeah, it's a great question, but I want to touch on something you just said because you said such a golden thing about gratitude. It's a word that we all know and we've heard, but I think you and and you clearly understand it. When you truly understand what a great like medicine it is for our soul, like it will shift so much, because you can't be grateful and angry, right? And you can't be grateful and sad. And so it's such a I'm so glad you said it. It's so spot on.
When I'm on my like streak of being so consistent with my gratitude, it's like magic. It's like
Yeah.
random things just happen to go
Yeah,
right
yeah,
for me all the
exactly.
time. And I'm like, whoa, this is great.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's it's awesome, right? Because all of a sudden you're like, I'm super lucky now, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah. So the circles. I mean, I found so I'll kind of just take you through the whole arc. And so here I am selling the business. There's all this money. I think everything is going to be great. I start looking at other things, but I have no sense of purpose. And I think that's what started to make me feel less inclined to want to like continue the path, right? Because you've got this money and it's like, okay, I'm going to go put it into something, right? And kind of like you said, I started trying these different things and I would look at opportunities and go there and just nothing felt right. And I never went for it. And that started this downward spiral, right? And it's like what I had said earlier about the focus and where your attention's going, and you start behaviors that start pushing away those people that are good in your life. And then you find yourself connecting to people that aren't necessarily, they've got their own problems, right? Because you start to become just like that. And it's not to be a judgment, but just where people are. And so if you find yourself, more consistently going out late at night, drinking or, smoking pot, doing whatever, like you're going to find yourself with a particular type of person who's living a certain lifestyle. And that's what took me there. And when I was at the bottom and starting to come out, I really had to gravitate and put myself in front of people that I cared about first because I knew that they had love for me. But over time, the evolution was just taking my curiosity. And I think genuine curiosity when it comes to talking to people really endears yourself to that person. I teach this because I do it all the time. It's like even in the business world, right? If you're interested in getting into a particular type of business, right? And you go find someone who's been at it 20, 30 years and you just go talk to them and you don't go to them like, you don't have to go pump their ego up, but you just say, hey, look, I respect what you've done. I've seen you've done this. I'd I mean, is it possible if I could buy you coffee or just talk to you? And most of those people who've done those things, if they see that you're genuinely curious and you got a little bit of a spark, they'll spend time with you, right? And then the more you connect with them, it's crazy what people are willing to reveal because everyone who's succeeded has been helped somewhere along the way. And when they have the opportunity to help somebody else, right, they'll always do it. And so that to me is how I really started to rebuild my circle, was just this curiosity of talking to people. And it wasn't even necessarily about business in the beginning. It was just being interested in what people do. Because at that point, when I was coming out of it, I was so unfocused and unclear that I was telling myself, I need to go to rehab so someone can tell me to take a toothbrush and clean a toilet, right? Like, cause that's how just disoriented and disconnected I was. But as I started to change my focus and shift and come back out of there, I started to get curious about everything because it was almost like I was I was like being reborn. So people that were teachers, dog trainer, it didn't matter. If someone was doing something that I thought was at a high level or something interesting, I just took my time and I would seek them out. I would go talk to them. I'd have coffee, right? And just sit there and learn as much as I can. And that really started to shift my entire paradigm of how I saw the world and took me in a place where from that naturally I started to develop these relationships and connections that sort of spiraled upward into kind of where it is.
Yeah, I mean, you've had quite a journey, and it sounds like you're on the track to even creating more impact and change. Where are you trying to kind of grow to next? Like, what are the next like milestones or metrics that you're trying to hit for yourself?
Yeah, my biggest so I had an experience last year where I was in Hawaii with my wife, and we got to sit in front and watch the sunrise in Maui, and I was so awe inspired by the sunrise, and I had this moment, and it was so simple, but I said I have a definition for myself about what a good life is, and I was sitting there going, if I can find myself in my 80s and 90s waking up every single morning to this type of awe-inspiring just nature, right? Mountains, ocean, whatever it is, then I will know that I led a good life, right? And so that putting this definition of where I want to be, right? The longevity of living that long, to be inspired and to be able to sit there and just enjoy life in that way has me very focused on the intention of the impact of what I want to do, because I felt like if I can achieve that, I will have done enough in the world that there's like all this grace coming back to me, right? It's like what you said with the gratitude, where you just start to get lucky, right? Very much so. I also believe that the more you do for others and the more you impact the world in a better way, I think that karma or the energy of that comes back to you financially, spiritually, and in a multitude of ways. And so for me, my biggest goal is if I can help shape and have people see me as an example of leadership, right? And I can have others sort of follow along in that path of whatever their chosen field is, and more than welcome to follow me through the path of entrepreneurship, then I will know I was doing the right thing, And so it's getting to that point of having those people inspired enough to kind of take that path of leading from the heart.
That is some powerful pictures you're portraying there, and I'm sure anybody listening would obviously want to get to a stage where they can do that or see that and just really experience some of that kind of success as that you're sharing there. And if somebody is listening or they're interested in kind of diving in a little bit more, where do they go to kind of get in contact with you and the team?
Yes. So it's the ownerspath.com. You come there, there's a form you can reach out. There's also on Instagram, it's just the owner's path. It's very small. I think we've got 14 followers. So you can be one of the new ones.
Nice.
But you can reach me directly there. And like I said, even if you're not interested in the coaching, I'm more than happy to respond to questions and even just pointing people in the right direction.
So checking out the website and then social media is the second best place to kind
Yep.
of get in contact with you if
Yep.
they have questions or any kind
Yeah.
of things. Cool. Awesome. Well, Mr. Kim, this was an incredible episode. I really appreciate you sharing a lot of the experience and things that you've gone through and where you're kind of changing and spinning and creating a lot more impact and fulfillment in the world. And I know super busy guy, and so I really appreciate you taking
Yeah.
the time to kind of sit and chat with us. But before I let you go, I want to ask you kind of like the cliche question: if you were to boil everything down that you've learned through the years, through all the different challenges and struggles that you've overcome, and the new obstacles that you're kind of working through now, you're talking to super young version of yourself, that early stage entrepreneur, and they're just looking for a little bit of advice to kind of get them moving and create some of that momentum. What would be your piece of advice to them?
I'll preface the advice with just this idea, because I think it's important to the advice, is that I think everybody in this world is given a gift of something, where every person has some level of greatness within them, right? An individual greatness that's just theirs. And I think the world and the noise of the world makes it very hard for us to hear that, this inner voice, this intuition that's within there. And so in order to cultivate that, the advice would be is to get as clear as you can And however you find your path to clarity, there will be a lot of inner work. For some people, it'll probably be doing one thing over and over for a long time. Others might be trying 1,000 things. But if you continue to work on yourself to get clear, your entire life now becomes so much smoother, right? I don't want to say it's easier because there's just difficulties in life, but that clarity will get you to where you want to go with a lot less friction because you won't be slowed down by all the noise.
Boom. I love that. Nothing in life is easy, but having a little bit of clarity on your side, I'll
Yeah,
certainly smooth out that ride.
for sure.
Powerful stuff. Thank you again so much for this
Thank
episode. This
you.
was really powerful. I really appreciate it too. And I know a lot of listeners are going to enjoy this and listen back multiple times. So thank you again and hope to connect with you again soon.
Thank you very much for having me.